Hello, my friends, and welcome to the Expensive Coins History channel. Somewhere in a dusty biscuit tin, tucked behind an old mass card and a folded phone bill from 30 years ago, there is a coin. It doesn't look like much. It's small. It's copper-colored. It says 1p on one side and has a little bird on the other. You've seen 1,000 of them. You probably threw a few into a charity box without a second thought. But this particular coin, this unassuming little disc that once bought you absolutely nothing of consequence, is quietly, secretly, one of the most valuable small coins ever struck in the entire history of the Irish Republic. And if you have one sitting in that tin right now, if you have one rattling around in the back of a kitchen drawer, you may be holding something that serious numismatic collectors across the world have been desperately searching for. Because that coin, the 1988 Ireland 1 penny, in certain verified conditions, has sold for $78,000. Let that sit with you for a moment. $78,000. For a penny. Now, before we go any further, I want you to do something for me. I want you to go and check that tin. Check that drawer. Check the old coat pockets. Check the glass jar on the windowsill. Because what we're about to discuss isn't fantasy. It isn't one of those viral internet rumors that evaporates the moment you look at it closely. This is real numismatic history, backed by auction records, collector testimony, and decades of research. And it begins, as all the most extraordinary things do, with something that was never supposed to exist at all. Let's go back. Let's go all the way back to Ireland in the late 1980s, because to truly understand why this coin is what it is, you need to feel the world it was born into. The Ireland of 1988 was a country in the middle of a profound identity crisis. The Celtic Tiger had not yet arrived. The economy was grinding. Emigration was bleeding the country of its young people at a devastating rate. In 1988 alone, more than 70,000 Irish citizens left the country to find work abroad. 70,000 people. In a country of 3.5 million. These weren't just statistics. These were families torn apart at airport departure gates. Mothers pressing folded notes into the hands of sons heading to London or Boston. Fathers standing rigid with pride and grief on the same afternoon. Ireland in 1988 was a place that was simultaneously ancient and urgently modern, a country trying to hold on to its culture while scrambling toward an economic future it wasn't sure would ever come. And in the middle of all of this, in the middle of this great human upheaval, the Central Bank of Ireland was doing something that would seem, on the surface, entirely mundane. They were minting coins. They were producing the everyday currency that would pass through the hands of grocers and publicans and schoolchildren. The 1 penny piece, the smallest denomination in the Irish decimal system. Now here is where the story gets interesting. Here is where history, as it so often does, turns on the smallest possible hinge. The Irish decimal coinage system had been established in 1971, when Ireland made the switch from the old pounds, shillings, and pence system to the new decimal currency. The coins that emerged from that transition were designed by an artist named Gabriel Hayes, and they were genuinely beautiful things. On the reverse of the 1 penny coin, Hayes placed an image of a bird, specifically an Irish Bronze Age bird design drawn from the ancient artistic tradition of the country. It wasn't a photorealistic sparrow or a proud eagle in the American tradition. It was something older and stranger and more compelling than that. It was a stylized bird of almost Celtic intricacy, wings angled with a kind of compressed energy, as though it was about to take flight from the coin's surface at any moment. On the obverse, the harp, Ireland's national symbol, sat against the inscription Éire, the Irish language name for Ireland. The denomination was marked clearly. These were coins of genuine artistic merit, and the 1 penny piece, humble as it was, carried within its small bronze disc a kind of quiet national pride. But the 1988 penny. The 1988 penny is a different creature entirely. To understand why, you need to understand how coin mintage works, because this is the key that unlocks the entire mystery of its value. Every year, the Central Bank of Ireland would authorize a certain number of coins to be struck for circulation. These numbers were determined by economic need. How much coinage was required to keep commerce flowing smoothly? In boom years, you strike more coins. In tight years, you strike fewer. And in certain years, for reasons that are sometimes purely administrative, sometimes logistical, and sometimes simply because existing stocks of coins were more than sufficient to meet demand. The mintage numbers could drop to levels that make coin historians sit up very straight and pay close attention. The 1988 Ireland 1 penny had a mintage that sent shockwaves through the numismatic community when it became fully understood. The number of coins struck for general circulation in that year was extraordinarily, almost impossibly low. We're talking about figures that place this coin in a category that most collectors spend entire lifetimes chasing without success. The precise mintage figures have been the subject of significant debate among Irish numismatists, but the consensus among serious researchers points to a production run so limited that finding one today, genuinely finding one in the kind of condition that collectors call mint state, meaning essentially uncirculated, with full original luster and no signs of wear, is an event comparable to finding a first edition book in pristine condition at a garage sale. It happens, but only just. Now, here is something that the casual observer often misses, and this is the piece of the puzzle that separates the curious viewer from the serious collector. The 1988 penny wasn't announced as rare. There was no fanfare. No newspaper headline proclaimed, "Ireland strikes its rarest modern coin." The coins went into circulation just like every other penny. They passed through hands. They bought crisps in school tuck shops. They sat in fruit machine trays in pubs along the West Coast. They rattled in the collection plates of rural churches. For years, nobody was paying particular attention. And that, ironically, is precisely why so few survived in collectible condition. Because when you don't know something is precious, you treat it accordingly. The collectors who first began to recognize the significance of the 1988 penny were, by and large, dedicated Irish numismatists who had been quietly cataloging mintage figures from the central bank's annual reports. These were people who understood that in the world of modern coinage, the difference between a common date and a key date could be the difference between a coin worth face value and a coin worth a small fortune. They began quietly acquiring any 1988 pennies they could find. They checked change. They went through old collections. They visited coin dealers in Dublin and Cork and Galway. And gradually, very gradually, the word began to spread through the close-knit world of Irish coin collecting that the 1988 penny was something special. But let's talk about the coin itself for a moment, because beyond the rarity, beyond the mintage figures and the auction records, there is a physical object here that deserves appreciation on its own terms. The 1988 Ireland 1 penny is struck in bronze, an alloy of copper, tin, and zinc, and it measures just over 2 centimeters in diameter. It weighs 3.56 grams. In the hand, it is almost nothing. It is barely there. And yet, when you hold a high-grade example of this coin, when you tilt it under a good light and watch the original mint luster bloom across its surface, there is something unmistakably alive about it. The Gabriel Hayes bird design, which had by 1988 been in use for nearly 2 decades, had not lost any of its power. The stylized bird still seemed to carry within it the deep memory of Irish artistic tradition. Those ancient manuscripts, those carved stone crosses, that centuries-long habit of investing even the smallest objects with meaning done on high-grade examples. The feather detailing of the bird is extraordinarily crisp. The field of the coin, the flat background surface, maintains a mirror-like quality that was characteristic of the better-struck coins from the Irish mint's production of this period. The edge is plain and clean. The lettering is precise. Everything about a well-preserved 1988 penny communicates a kind of quiet confidence, as though the coin itself knows what it is, even if nobody else did for a long time. And now let's talk about the collectors who have shaped this coin story, because numismatics, the study and collection of coins, is never really just about the metal. It is always about the people. There is a particular type of collector who is drawn to Irish coinage, and they are a fascinating subspecies of the broader numismatic world. Many of them are members of the Irish diaspora, people living in America, in Australia, in Britain, in Canada, whose connection to Ireland is mediated through objects. They collect Irish coins not simply because the coins are rare or valuable, though those qualities matter enormously, but because the coins are a form of tangible history. Each one is a physical artifact from a specific moment in Irish life. Each one passed through Irish hands. Each one carries, in some sense that is more than merely metaphorical, a piece of the country itself. When this community began to understand the significance of the 1988 penny, The response was electric. Coin shows in Dublin saw unprecedented interest in Irish decimal coinage. Online auction platforms that had barely registered Irish modern coins as a category of interest suddenly began seeing bidding wars over certified examples of the 1988 penny. A community of collectors that had always existed but had operated in relative obscurity suddenly found itself at the center of considerable international attention. The certification services, the professional grading companies that evaluate coins, assign them a numerical grade on a standardized scale, and seal them in tamper-evident plastic holders, began to see submissions of 1988 Irish pennies arrive in meaningful numbers. Collectors who had discovered examples in old collections, inherited from parents or grandparents, were suddenly sending their copper treasures off to be professionally evaluated. And the results were often extraordinary. High-grade examples, coins grading MS 65 or above in the standard numismatic scale, meaning they were essentially perfect, with no trace of wear, full original luster, and only the most minimal surface marks, began appearing on the market and attracting serious money. Now, I want to address something directly, because this is a question that always comes up when we talk about coins of this kind of value. People ask, but it's just a penny. Why would anyone pay that much for something that was face value 1 penny? And the answer reveals something profound about why human beings collect things at all. Rarity, in the numismatic world, operates on a completely different logic than everyday commerce. The question isn't what the coin was worth when it was made. The question is, how many of these exist in this condition? Because if the answer is very few, if the answer is that you could count the certified high-grade examples of this coin on 2 hands, then you are no longer talking about a penny. You are talking about an artifact. You are talking about something that represents the intersection of history, artistry, and scarcity in a way that the market values enormously. Consider that there are collectors in this world, serious, knowledgeable, well-resourced collectors, who are specifically working to build complete sets of Irish decimal coinage in the highest possible grades. These are people who may have already spent years and substantial sums assembling nearly complete collections. And when they arrive at the 1988 penny, they find themselves facing the single hardest coin in the entire series to acquire. Not just in Ireland, not just in Europe, but among modern decimal coinage sets anywhere in the world. For those collectors, the question of price becomes almost secondary. The coin is essential. The coin is the one they need. And when something is simultaneously essential and extremely rare, the market responds accordingly. The 1988 Ireland 1 penny has appeared at major numismatic auctions on both sides of the Atlantic. It has passed through the hands of institutional collectors, private collectors, and specialist dealers who focus exclusively on Celtic and British Isles coinage. Each time a high-grade certified example comes to market, it generates the kind of quiet, focused excitement that characterizes the top end of the coin collecting world, an excitement that is all the more intense for being so controlled, so professional, so different from the frenzied bidding wars of popular imagination. But here's what I find most remarkable about this coin. And it's the thing I want you to carry away from this chapter, even if you forget everything else. This is a coin that was made in a country that was struggling. It was made in a year when Ireland was exporting its people to the world in search of futures they couldn't find at home. And yet, in that same year, someone at the Irish Mint was doing their job with extraordinary care and precision, striking coins that would one day be recognized as masterpieces of their humble genre. Someone was minding the die alignment. Someone was checking the strike pressure. Someone was ensuring that those small bronze birds flew cleanly from the minting press, full of detail and life. Even though they were only pennies, even though they would slip into circulation unnoticed, there's something deeply human about that. Something that speaks to the way dignity and craftsmanship persist even in hard times. Maybe especially in hard times. And this is why the 1988 Ireland 1 penny is not just a valuable coin. It is a meaningful coin. It carries within it the complexity of a particular Irish moment, the struggle, the artistry, the resilience, compressed into a disc of bronze barely larger than a thumbnail. Now, if you have reached this point in the video and you are thinking about your own old coin collections, your parents' change jars, your grandparents' biscuit tins, I want to be very clear with you about what to look for. The date is the first thing. 1988, on the reverse of the coin, below the bird design. The second thing is condition. A 1988 penny that has been heavily circulated, scratched, worn, dull, will have significant value to an Irish decimal collector but will not reach the extraordinary figures we're discussing here. What drives the highest prices is originality. Mint luster. The coin as it left the press. Undisturbed. As close to the moment of its creation as the decades allow. If you find such a coin, do not clean it. I cannot emphasize this strongly enough. Do not clean it. Do not polish it. Do not attempt to improve it. The fastest way to destroy the value of a rare coin is to interfere with its surface. Simply store it safely, in a soft coin flip or a proper holder, and consult a professional numismatist or a reputable coin dealer before taking any further steps. The coin's value is in its authenticity. Preserve that above all else. And now, the moment you have been waiting for since the beginning of this chapter, this coin. This small, extraordinary, copper-bronze bird penny from the struggling Ireland of 1988. In certified mint state condition at the highest grades, verified by professional grading services and authenticated to the full satisfaction of the numismatic community. The 1988 Ireland 1 penny has sold for $78,000 for a coin that was once worth, in the currency of its day, approximately 1/100th of a pound. Let that land. Let it really land. Because somewhere, right now, in a home not entirely unlike yours, in a kitchen drawer or a bedroom dresser or a cardboard box in a garage, there may be a coin that is worth more than a new car, more than a year of private school tuition, more than many people earn in 2 years of hard work. And it looks like a penny. Close your eyes for a moment. Picture a marketplace, not a modern one with fluorescent lights and barcode scanners, but an older kind, a proper Irish street market from the early 1970s, with wooden stalls and canvas awnings and the smell of wet wool and turf smoke hanging in the damp morning air. A woman reaches into her coat pocket and produces a handful of coins. She counts them carefully, the way people count money when every penny genuinely matters, when the arithmetic of a grocery list is a serious domestic exercise. She selects a coin, places it on the counter, receives her change, and moves on. The coin she left behind is a 1-penny piece. It is copper-colored and small. It has a bird on one side and a harp on the other. She doesn't look at it twice. Nobody does. It's a penny. It's nothing. But that coin, that specific coin, if it happened to bear the date 1974, was not nothing. That coin was the beginning of one of the most quietly extraordinary numismatic stories in the entire history of Irish coinage. A story that runs through political crisis and economic turmoil, through the hands of thousands of ordinary people who never suspected what they were touching, through decades of collector obsession and archival research and auction house drama, to arrive, finally, at a number that will change the way you look at every old coin you have ever owned. That number is $96,000. But we are not going to start there. We are going to earn that number. We are going to walk all the way around it, examine every facet of it, understand exactly why it exists and what it means. Because a number without a story is just a number. And this story, the story of the 1974 Ireland 1 penny, deserves to be told properly. To understand the 1974 penny, you have to understand the world that produced it. And the world that produced it was one of the most turbulent, complicated, and emotionally charged periods in modern Irish history. Because 1974 was not simply a year. In Ireland, 1974 was an open wound. The Troubles, that grim, understated term for the decades-long conflict in Northern Ireland, were at a particularly savage peak. The previous year, 1973, had seen the Sunningdale Agreement, a fragile attempt to establish power sharing in Northern Ireland that had generated cautious hope in some quarters and fierce resistance in others. By 1974, that hope was being systematically destroyed. The Ulster Workers' Council strike in May of that year brought Northern Ireland to a standstill. The power-sharing executive collapsed. And across the island, in both the Republic and the North, people were living with a level of political anxiety and grief that is difficult to fully communicate to those who did not experience it. The Dublin and Monaghan bombings of May 1974 killed 33 people and injured almost 300. They remain the deadliest single day of the entire Troubles. They happened in the Republic, on ordinary streets, in ordinary afternoon crowds. They demonstrated, with devastating clarity, that the violence was not something that could be contained behind the border. It was Ireland's violence, all of Ireland's. And in that same year, the Central Bank of Ireland was authorizing the production of coins. The ordinary business of a functioning economy continued, as it must, even while the country processed its trauma. Wages were paid. Markets operated. Coins changed hands. The mint produced its annual run of denominations, and among them was the 1 penny piece. That same small bronze bird coin that Gabriel Hayes had designed, that had been in circulation since the decimal transition of 1971. Now, here is where numismatic history and political history intersect in a way that is both fascinating and unexpected. The early 1970s were a period of significant monetary instability across the developed world. The Bretton Woods system, the international monetary framework that had governed currency exchange since the Second World War, had collapsed in 1971 when the United States ended the convertibility of the dollar to gold. This sent shockwaves through every economy that was integrated into the global financial system, and Ireland was no exception. Inflation, which had been relatively controlled through the 1960s, began to accelerate. The price of raw materials, including the metals used in coinage, rose sharply. Copper, which was the primary component of the Irish pennies bronze alloy, became significantly more expensive on international markets. This created an unusual situation for the Central Bank of Ireland. The cost of producing a penny was rising. In some years, the metal value of the coin threatened to approach or even exceed the coin's face value, an absurd but entirely real economic problem that has plagued copper coinage throughout history and has occasionally, in various countries and various eras, led to citizens melting down their coins for scrap metal. The central bank, mindful of these pressures and also aware that coinage stock levels needed to be managed carefully against actual circulation demand, made production decisions in the early and mid-1970s that were characterized by unusual variability from year to year. Some years saw robust mintage figures. Other years saw production numbers that were strikingly low. In 1974, partly because of existing coin stocks, partly because of the metal cost pressures, partly because of the broader economic and political uncertainty that made precise forecasting extremely difficult, produced a 1 penny mintage figure that, when the full picture eventually became clear to the numismatic community, was recognized as one of the lowest in the entire run of Irish decimal coinage. But here is the detail that separates the 1974 penny from the 1988 penny we discussed earlier. Here is why these two coins, though they share a denomination and a basic design, tell completely different stories and command different levels of numismatic reverence. The 1974 penny's rarity was not simply a matter of low mintage numbers. It was compounded by something that collectors call survivorship, and understanding survivorship is essential to understanding why certain rare coins are rarer still than their mintage figures alone would suggest. Survivorship refers to the proportion of a coin's original mintage that survives in collectible condition. A coin may have been produced in relatively small numbers, but if a significant proportion of those surviving examples happen to be in excellent condition, if collectors were active in preserving them early, if the coins circulated in a region where they were treated gently, if they were pulled from circulation quickly by alert numismatists, then the survivorship rate in high grades might be reasonably good. The effective rarity in top condition is the mintage multiplied by survivorship, and that product is what actually determines how many coins are available to the collector market. For the 1974 penny, the survivorship story is particularly harsh. The coins that were struck in that year entered a circulation environment that was, to put it gently, not conducive to coin preservation. Ireland in 1974 was not a country of surplus. It was not a country where people were casually pulling pennies from their change and setting them aside in folders. People were using their money. They were spending their pennies in the markets and the shops and the bus queues. The coins were handled extensively, passed through hundreds of hands, carried in pockets against keys and other coins, deposited in machines, lost down drains, tossed into wishing wells. The ordinary brutal biography of a circulated coin. And when collectors did begin to pay attention to Irish decimal coinage in the 1980s and 1990s, the coins that had already spent a decade or more in circulation were not the coins that excited the serious graders. They were interesting low-grade examples, worth something certainly, but not the extraordinary prices that only come with extraordinary condition. The high-grade 1974 pennies, the ones that somehow made it through those years without being worn, without being scratched, without being subjected to the relentless erosion of daily commerce, were vanishingly rare. The story of how those few surviving high-grade examples came to be known is itself a kind of detective story. Some were found in original mint sets, annual package collections of coins produced for collectors and never intended for circulation. These sets, issued by the central bank in small numbers, preserved coins in their original condition, protected from the moment of production. Others were found in old shop tills that had been retired and stored without anyone examining their contents. One famous example in the Irish numismatic community came from a bank vault clearance, a parcel of unsorted old coins that a sharp-eyed dealer purchased in bulk and sorted through with the patience and focus of a man who understood that patience and focus occasionally produce extraordinary rewards. Each discovery of a high-grade 1974 penny became a small event in the community. Word traveled through the network of dealers and collectors and researchers. Notes were compared, grades were debated, and gradually, painfully gradually, the full picture of the coin's rarity and top condition became clear. Let's spend a moment with the coin itself, because like its 1988 counterpart, the 1974 penny is a physical object of genuine beauty, and its physical qualities are inseparable from its value story at first glance. The 1974 penny looks identical to any other Irish decimal penny of the era. The Gabriel Haysbird design occupies the reverse. The harp and air inscription occupy the obverse. The denomination is marked clearly. The coin is bronze, small, light. Nothing about it announces itself as extraordinary, but look more carefully at a high-grade example. Really look, under proper numismatic lighting, with a loupe if you have one, and you begin to see things that casual observation misses. The strike quality of the 1974 penny, at its best, is exceptional. The feather detailing on the bird is rendered with a sharpness that speaks to careful die preparation and precise minting pressure. The fields, those flat background areas that show the coin's luster most dramatically, carry a warmth and depth that is characteristic of well-struck bronze in pristine condition. There is a color to a properly preserved 1974 penny that collectors describe as original red, that specific, unrepeatable orange-copper glow that fresh bronze carries when it has never been touched by the chemistry of circulation. Original red is the holy grail of bronze coin preservation. It is the color of a coin that has been, in some sense, protected by time rather than eroded by it. When a 1974 Ireland 1 penny presents in original red with a full, undisturbed luster and the tight, precise strike of a well-produced example. When the professional graders at the major certification services see it come across their desk and assign it one of those top-tier mint state grades that collectors dream about, there is a collective intake of breath in the numismatic world. Because everyone who knows Irish decimal coinage knows what they are looking at. They are looking at one of the rarest things in their field. Now, I want to talk about the collectors who have built their reputations, in part, on their pursuit of this coin. Because the 1974 penny has attracted a particular kind of collector attention, a more intense, more focused, more almost scholarly kind of attention than even most rare coins receive. There are numismatists who have dedicated years to researching Irish central bank production records from the early 1970s. They have filed requests for archival information, corresponded with former mint officials, cross-referenced mintage data with surviving coin census numbers from the certification services, and built detailed population reports that track every known high-grade example of the 1974 penny. These reports are updated whenever a new certified example surfaces, and the updates are followed with the same kind of attention that other people give to sports results or stock prices. The population is small, disturbingly small by the standards of what one might expect from a modern circulation coin. The number of certified examples and the grades that command the extraordinary prices we will discuss shortly can be counted in a way that makes you understand, viscerally and immediately, why those prices exist. When you are one of only a handful of people in the world who can offer a particular coin in a particular condition, the market is not really a market in the conventional sense. It is something closer to a negotiation between obsession and availability. And the collectors who want this coin are, in many cases, people who have already assembled remarkable collections of Irish numismatic material. People who have spent decades and substantial fortunes acquiring the great rarities of Irish coinage. The pre-decimal issues, the early Free State coins, the key dates from the consolidation period of Irish monetary history. These are sophisticated, experienced collectors who are not easily impressed. And yet the 1974 penny impresses them. It stops them. It is, for many who collect Irish decimal coinage comprehensively, the single coin that defines the challenge of the entire endeavor. There is a phrase that serious collectors use, the impossible coin. Every great numismatic series has one. It's the coin that appears on every want list and almost never appears for sale. The coin that makes a complete collection incomplete for years, sometimes for entire lifetimes. In Irish decimal coinage, the 1974 penny in high grade is the impossible coin. It is the one that makes grown men who have paid tens of thousands of dollars for other rare coins feel a very specific kind of frustrated longing that is, in its own way, one of the peculiar joys of this hobby, because the longing and the pursuit are part of it. They always have been. The collector who finds the impossible coin doesn't just acquire a piece of metal. They close a chapter of their life. They mark a before and an after. The coin becomes part of their personal history that I've spoken to collectors over the years who remember exactly where they were, what season it was, what the light looked like, when they finally held an example of a coin they had been seeking for a decade or more. They remember it the way people remember significant life events, the way they remember graduations and weddings and the births of children. Because for a certain kind of person, the impossible coin found is an event of that magnitude. It is the resolution of a long, absorbing, meaningful story. The 1974 Ireland 1 penny has been the subject of that kind of story many times over. Now let's talk about what happens when one of these coins reaches the auction market. Because the theater of a great numismatic auction is worth describing, particularly for viewers who have never attended one or witnessed one online. When a high-grade 1974 Ireland penny appears in a major coin auction, properly described, properly certified, with full provenance documentation, something very specific happens in the collector community. The auction catalog entry circulates. It is shared, discussed, analyzed. Photographs are scrutinized at maximum magnification. The grade assigned by the certification service is evaluated against the collector's own expert eye. Questions are asked. Is the strike as sharp as described? Does the luster appear undisturbed? Is the color genuine original red, or has there been some environmental interaction? Is the provenance clean and documented? All of this analysis happens before a single bid is placed. It happens in the weeks and days leading up to the auction, in quiet email exchanges between dealers and their clients, in forum threads among serious collectors, in telephone conversations between people who have spent 30 years learning to read coins the way other experts read X-rays or legal documents. By the time the auction actually opens, the bidding community that has done its homework is ready. And when the lot comes up, the bidding can be swift and fierce and carry a kind of compressed intensity that makes you understand, even through a screen, that something genuinely significant is changing hands. The hammer falls. A number appears. And somewhere, a collector who has been waiting for years allows themselves a quiet moment of profound satisfaction. Let me tell you something about the geography of this coin's collectors, because it reveals something fascinating about the nature of cultural attachment and numismatic desire. The most competitive bidders for high-grade examples of the 1974 Ireland penny are not always based in Ireland. Many of them are members of the Irish diaspora, particularly in the United States, where communities of Irish descent maintain deep, sometimes fiercely maintained connections to their ancestral homeland. These are people whose grandparents or great-grandparents left Ireland in the waves of emigration that reshaped the Irish population across the 20th century. They did not grow up in Ireland. They may never have lived there. And yet the coins of Ireland speak to something in them that is not purely financial. The coins are a connection, a tangible, holdable, examinable piece of a place and a history that is theirs by inheritance, if not by immediate experience. When these collectors bid on a 1974 Ireland penny, they are not simply buying a rare numismatic artifact. They are, in some sense that is both sentimental and entirely serious, buying a piece of themselves, a piece of where they came from. And that additional layer of meaning, that cultural and emotional valence, is part of what drives the prices to the extraordinary levels they reach. There is nothing unusual about this. The most valuable coins in every national numismatic tradition carry this kind of cultural weight. American collectors bid ferociously for key-date Morgan dollars not simply because they are rare, but because those coins represent a particular American moment: the expanding frontier, the silver economy, the raw promise of the late 19th century that speaks to something deep in the national imagination. Irish collectors and members of the Irish diaspora respond to their own coins in the same way, with the same mixture of historical consciousness and personal feeling. The 1974 Ireland 1 penny is, in this sense, more than a coin. It is a time capsule from one of the most painful and complex years in modern Irish history. It is a physical survivor of a time when Ireland was navigating grief and division and economic uncertainty with the kind of exhausted determination that has characterized the Irish response to hardship throughout the centuries. Every penny struck in that year left the mint carrying, without knowing it, the specific weight of 1974. And the few that survived in pristine condition carry it still. So here is where we have arrived. Here is the moment toward which this entire chapter has been building, the way a long journey builds toward a view that makes every difficult step worthwhile. If you have a 1974 Ireland 1 penny, especially if you have one that has been stored away, protected from circulation, preserved in anything like its original condition, you may be holding the most valuable penny in the entire history of Irish coinage. More valuable than anything that came before it. More valuable than anything that has come after. The key date of the entire Irish decimal series. The impossible coin.in certified mint state condition, at the highest grades, verified and authenticated, and presented to the full satisfaction of the world's most rigorous numismatic standards. The 1974 Ireland 1 penny has sold for $96,000. $96,000. For a coin that was made during one of Ireland's darkest years, that passed through the hands of people who were living through crisis and grief and uncertainty, that sat in tills and pockets and biscuit tins for decades without anyone knowing what they had. $96,000. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the extraordinary world of rare Irish coinage, if this video made you look at your old change jar with fresh and genuinely curious eyes, then please hit that like button right now. It tells the algorithm that this content matters and helps us reach the collectors and history lovers who are meant to find it. Subscribe to the Expensive Coins History channel if you haven't already, because we go this deep on rare coins every single week. And leave a comment below telling us, do you collect Irish coins? Have you ever found a key date in your change? We read every comment, and the stories our viewers share are some of the best in the business. The biscuit tin is waiting. The drawer is waiting. The coin you've been walking past for 30 years might be waiting too. Go look.